The workshop smelled of ozone and regret. Gideon Thatcher stood alone in the half-light, hands moving through motions he'd performed 10,000 times before. Clean the tools, check the seals, arrange the diagnostic panels in precise rows. Each movement deliberate, measured, safe. Outside, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly under stars that had watched men make the same mistakes for millennia. Inside, he kept his hands busy so his mind couldn't wander to the date on the calendar. 4 months. 4 months since Lieutenant Breathless Harlow had walked out of this workshop wearing armor he'd rushed to repair, confident in readouts that lied, trusting him with a faith he hadn't deserved. She never walked back in. The diagnostic screen still showed her final telemetry if he was foolish enough to look. He wasn't. Not anymore. Not after the first 100 times had carved the numbers into memory like scars that refused to heal. Neural feedback cascade, systems failure, flatline. All because he'd trusted green lights on a panel instead of the slight hesitation in her voice when she'd said she felt fine. Speed had killed her. His speed, his certainty, his failure. The wrench in his hand gleamed under the fluorescent lights, perfectly clean, perfectly useless. He set it down with the others, aligned to the millimeter, and reached for the next. The ritual kept the ghosts at bay. Mostly. The workshop door opened with a pneumatic hiss that shattered the silence. Gideon turned, already forming the words to send away whoever had decided 2 in the morning was an appropriate time for a visit. The words died unspoken. She stood in the doorway like something carved from determination and starlight. Commander Caleth Vera, Velar Alliance, attached to Earth Unified Defense under terms of the treaty that was supposed to prove 2 species could work together without killing each other. So far, results were mixed. Her armor told the story of how mixed. The chest plate bore a fracture that spiderwebbed from sternum to shoulder, edges still glowing faintly with residual energy discharge. Smoke drifted from the seams. She held herself utterly straight despite what must have been considerable pain. Long ears swept back in what his limited experience with Velar body language suggested was controlled determination. Her eyes, violet in the strange light, fixed on him with an intensity that made him want to check if he'd forgotten to wear pants. Chief Warrant Officer Thatcher. Her voice carried the precise diction of someone speaking a language learned through study rather than birth, each word shaped carefully. Colonel Ashford has directed me to your workshop for armor repair. I require full operational capability within 4 hours. Gideon's stomach dropped like a stone down a well that had no bottom. 4 hours. The fracture pattern that even from across the room he could see matched the one that had killed Bridget Harlow. His hands started to shake before he could stop them. Ma'am, his voice came out rougher than intended. He cleared his throat, tried again. Ma'am, I need to run diagnostics before I can give you a timeline. If you'll just... She moved past him with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime training for combat, leaving a faint scent of cordite and something else. Something almost like cinnamon. Up close, the damage was worse. Much worse. The fracture didn't just split the outer shell. It penetrated deep, possibly all the way to the neural interface layer that connected directly to her nervous system, exactly like Bridget's. 4 hours is not a request for timeline estimation, Chief Thatcher. Caleth positioned herself beside the primary diagnostic platform, clearly familiar with the procedure. It is the maximum time available before I must return to tactical command. The Cartheks have probed our perimeter 3 times in the past 6 hours. Pattern analysis suggests a major assault is imminent today. I am the only officer on this base with combat experience against Carthek's assault doctrine. Without me in command, casualty projections increase by a factor of 3. She turned those violet eyes on him again. You will find a way to make 4 hours sufficient. It wasn't arrogance. Gideon had worked with enough officers to recognize arrogance. This was something colder, harder. Necessity speaking through a woman who'd already calculated the cost of failure and accepted it as the price of duty. He'd seen that look before, in the mirror, before Bridget. Ma'am, I need to be straight with you. Gideon moved to the diagnostic panel, hands steadier now that he had something concrete to focus on. That fracture pattern, I've seen it before. Repaired it before, 4 months ago, under time pressure, for Lieutenant Bridget Harlow. He pulled up the archival comparison, let the holographic displays speak the truth he couldn't quite voice. Twin fractures, identical propagation patterns, same critical penetration depth. The only difference was the name on the file. Lieutenant Harlow's armor failed catastrophically during combat operations. The words came out flat, clinical, the only way he could say them without breaking. Neural feedback cascade. She died instantly. Silence filled the workshop like water filling lungs. Caliph studied the displays without expression, taking in the technical readouts, the failure analysis, the final status report that used words like operator casualty, instead of saying a 26-year-old woman with her whole life ahead of her had stopped existing because the man standing 3 feet away had been too confident in his own expertise. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, not softer, quieter. How long did you spend on her repair, Chief Thatcher? 4 hours. Exactly 4 hours. Colonel's orders, time-critical situation. The bitterness in his voice surprised him. All the diagnostics showed green. Perfect seal integrity, neural pathway stability within normal parameters, energy distribution optimal. Every single reading said the repair was solid. But it was not. No, ma'am, it was not. Caliph turned away from the displays, faced him directly. This close, he could see the fine lines of strain around her eyes, the way her jaw was set just slightly too tight. She was in pain, had been in pain, probably for hours, and hadn't said a word about it because duty came first, just like Bridget. Chief Thatcher. She paused, seemed to be choosing her words with the same care she'd used picking her way through a minefield. I am sorry for your loss. Lieutenant Harlow's service record indicates she was an exceptional soldier and technician. Her death was a tragedy. Gideon said nothing. What was there to say? However, one ear angled forward slightly, a gesture he didn't understand. I submit that you now possess knowledge more valuable than untested confidence. You know precisely what failure looks like. You know the cost of rushing, of trusting instruments over instinct, of allowing pressure to override caution. She gestured at the diagnostic displays still showing Bridget's failed armor. I do not fear your past failure, Chief Thatcher. I trust you're learning from it. Begin the repair. Do it properly. Take whatever time you require to do it right. For a moment, Gideon could only stare at her. In 4 months, no one had said anything like that. The official inquiry had cleared him of negligence. His commanding officers had expressed sympathy. His fellow techs had carefully avoided the subject entirely. Everyone had treated the incident like a landmine that might explode if mentioned. This Valar commander he'd met 30 seconds ago had just looked straight at his worst moment and told him it made him more qualified, not less. Ma'am, he had to clear his throat again. I appreciate the confidence, but 4 hours isn't enough time to do this repair safely. Not with this damage pattern. I need 8 hours minimum to properly seal all 3 layers: kinetic shell, energy lattice, and neural interface. Cutting corners on any of those risks exactly what happened to Lieutenant Harlow. Then we have a problem. Kayla's voice remained calm, but something shifted in her posture. Not retreat, recalculation. Because in 4 hours, Carthek's assault forces will likely breach our perimeter. Without proper tactical coordination, we will lose personnel, potentially many personnel. And if I rush this repair, you could end up paralyzed or dead, and those same personnel lose their commander anyway. Gideon met her eyes, refusing to look away. Ma'am, I can't do what you're asking. Not in good conscience, not after Bridget. The silence stretched between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross first. Outside the workshop, the desert wind made a sound like breathing against the reinforced walls. Somewhere in the base, someone laughed at a joke Gideon couldn't hear. Life continuing, indifferent to the small tragedy playing out in this room, where a man who'd failed once faced the choice of failing again or refusing to try. Caliph moved then, not toward him, but toward the diagnostic platform. She reached out, fingers hovering over the control interface, then stopped. May I? She asked. Gideon nodded, curious despite everything. She activated the platform's holographic display, pulled up diagnostic specifications for Sentinel-class armor. Her fingers moved with practiced ease, isolating the 3 critical repair layers Gideon had mentioned, displaying the time requirements for each, the safety protocols, the risk assessments. When she finished, a complete repair timeline floated in the air between them. 8 hours, 13 minutes. No shortcuts, no compromises, everything by the book. She studied it for a long moment, both ears rotating through several positions Gideon couldn't interpret. Then she pulled up a second display, tactical projections for the base defense. Without her in command, projected casualties range from 23 to 47 personnel, depending on Karthek's commitment level. With her commanding, those numbers dropped to 5 to 12. Simple math, brutal math, the kind of calculation that turned human lives into numbers on a screen. Chief Thatcher, Kayla's voice was steady as stone. If I order you to complete this repair in 4 hours, will you obey? The question hit him like a physical blow, because the answer was yes. She outranked him. The colonel had ordered her armor repaired. If she made it a direct order, he'd have to comply or face court-martial, and they both knew it. Yes, ma'am. The words tasted like ashes. If you make it a direct order, I'll do my best to complete the repair in 4 hours. And what will your best achieve in 4 hours? Gideon pulled up a probability matrix he'd run 100 times in the 4 months since Bridget, refining it with bitter hindsight. The numbers didn't lie even when he wished they would. 40% chance of complete success. 40% chance of minor neural damage. Numbness, reduced response time. Nothing that would prevent you from commanding, but enough to impact your combat effectiveness long-term. 20% chance of catastrophic failure resulting in permanent paralysis or death. Calith studied the numbers without expression. And with the full 8-hour timeline, 95% success rate. The remaining 5% accounts for unexpected material failure or underlying damage I can't detect with current diagnostic equipment. Acceptable odds. She turned away from the displays, faced him directly. Chief Thatcher, I'm going to make a decision now. You will not like it. Colonel Ashford will not like it. The tactical situation will not like it. But it is the decision I'm making. She drew herself up to full height, and despite being several inches shorter than Gideon, suddenly seemed to fill the entire workshop. You will repair this armor using the full 8-hour protocol. You will take whatever time is necessary to do it correctly. You will not cut corners. You will not rush. You will not compromise safety standards for expediency. Is that clear? Gideon felt something in his chest that had been clenched tight for 4 months loosen slightly. Ma'am, the colonel's orders are about to be superseded by mine. Calith moved to the workshop's communication terminal, keyed in Colonel Ashford's direct line. I will take full responsibility for this decision. You will focus on your work. The screen flickered to life, showing Colonel Thomas Ashford's deeply unimpressed face. The man looked like he'd been carved from granite that had seen too many wars and wasn't enthusiastic about another. Silver hair in a regulation cut, jaw that could crack walnuts, eyes that had seen soldiers die and knew exactly how much that cost. Commander Vera, his voice carried the gravel of too many years shouting orders over gunfire. Status report. Colonel, I'm in Chief Thatcher's workshop. He's evaluated my armor damage and determined that a safe repair requires 8 hours minimum. I'm informing you that I will not be available for tactical command for the next 8 hours. Ashford's expression went from unimpressed to actively hostile. Commander, we have a Karthek's assault projected in 4 hours. I need you operational. That's why I sent you to Thatcher. He's the best we have. And the best we have says he needs 8 hours to do the job properly, sir. Kayla's voice remained perfectly level, but Gideon caught the slight shift in her posture. Spine straighter, shoulders back. I'm choosing to trust his professional judgment. You're choosing to sit out the most critical defensive operation this base has faced in 6 months. Ashford leaned forward, and the screen made him seem even larger. Commander, I appreciate the Alliance protocols. I respect your service record, but I need you to understand something. Your people volunteered to prove Bellar and humans can work together. Right now, you're putting the entire base at risk for your personal safety. How do you think that's going to reflect on the Alliance? It was a brutal shot, perfectly aimed. Gideon saw Calith's ears flatten completely against her skull. Pain, he realized, or maybe shame. Ashford had just weaponized her entire reason for being on Earth. But when she spoke, her voice didn't waver. Colonel, with respect, I am proving exactly what the Alliance is meant to demonstrate. I am trusting a human expert's professional assessment over political pressure or tactical convenience. Chief Thatcher says 8 hours for a safe repair. I believe him. If that faith is misplaced, the failure is mine to own. but I will not ask him to rush and risk creating another casualty like Lieutenant Harlow. The silence from Ashford's end of the call was deafening. You know about Harlow? His voice had gone quiet. Chief Thatcher informed me. Identical damage pattern. Rushed repair. Fatal failure. Both ears angled forward again, that same determined angle. I will not add my name to that list because we were too afraid to trust expertise over urgency. Sir, with respect, if I'm paralyzed or dead, I'm worthless to this base anyway. If we're going to lose me, let it be in combat serving a purpose, not on a repair table because we couldn't wait 8 hours for competent work. Ashford stared at her for what felt like a year. Then his eyes shifted to Gideon, who'd been trying very hard to become invisible during this exchange. Thatcher, is she right? You need 8 hours? Yes, sir, minimum. Maybe 9 if I find additional damage during the inner layer work. In 4 hours? 40% full success, 40% permanent impairment, 20% she doesn't walk out of here. Gideon forced himself to hold the colonel's gaze. Sir, I can't recommend rushing this, not with this damage. Ashford was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed and suddenly looked every one of his 63 years. Commander Vera, I'm putting in my official record that I disagreed with this decision. I think you're making a mistake. I think you're putting personal safety over tactical necessity. He paused. But I'm also noting that you're showing more moral courage than half the officers I've served with. 8 hours, not a minute more. Thatcher, you make this right. Yes, sir. The screen went dark. Kalith remained standing, straight for another few seconds. Then her shoulders sagged just slightly. Not much. Just enough for Gideon to see it had cost her. You just destroyed your promotion track, he said quietly. She turned to face him, and there was something new in her expression. Not quite a smile, too tired for that, but close. Chief Thatcher, I came to Earth to prove that Valar and humans could trust each other across species lines. If that trust dies the first time it becomes inconvenient, then it was never real. She moved toward the diagnostic platform. I would rather have integrity in a stalled career than advancement built on compromised principles. Now, shall we begin? Gideon looked at her for a long moment. This alien commander who just sacrificed her career trajectory to let him do his job right. Who turned his greatest failure into a reason to trust rather than doubt. Who stood there in smoking armor and pain she refused to acknowledge, choosing principle over expediency. Bridget would have liked her, he thought, would have approved. Yes, ma'am. He moved to the diagnostic platform, hands steady for the first time in 4 months. Let's do this properly. Step up onto the platform, please. I need to run a full structural analysis before we start the actual repair work. Kalith complied, positioning herself in the center of the diagnostic field. Arrays of sensors hummed to life, bathing her in pale blue light that made her seem even more ethereal. The armor began reporting its damage in cascading holograms around her. Stress fractures, energy bleed points, compromised neural pathways. Gideon worked with practiced efficiency, calling up detail scans, cross-referencing material integrity, building a complete picture of exactly what he was dealing with. The more he saw, the more certain he became that 8 hours was optimistic, and that 4 hours would have killed her. Diagnostics complete, he announced, pulling up the final damage report. Okay, here's what we're looking at. 3 distinct repair layers, each one critical. First layer is the kinetic shell, the outer armor plating. That's fractured in a 17-centimeter pattern across your chest plate, with micro fractures radiating out another 8 centimeters beyond that. Repair time, approximately 2 hours. He highlighted the next layer. Second layer is the energy lattice. This disperses plasma impacts and explosive force across the armor surface instead of letting it punch through. Your lattice has 12 nodes that are completely non-functional, plus another 20 showing degraded performance. This is actually your most critical damage point. If you'd taken another solid hit in combat, the energy would have channeled straight through to your body instead of dispersing. That's a 3-hour repair, minimum. Kalith studied the display, one ear rotating back, concern maybe, understanding the gravity of the situation. In the third layer, she asked? Neural interface. Gideon pulled up the innermost scan and his stomach tightened. This is the layer that connects the armor directly to your nervous system, lets you control it like a second skin. You've got hairline fractures in the interface conduits, here, and here. Individually, not a major problem. But combined with the other damage, if we tried a rush repair, the neural feedback from the sealing process would have, he trailed off, would have created a cascade failure like Lieutenant Harlow experienced. Calith finished quietly. Yes, ma'am. She was quiet for a moment, studying the technical readouts with more understanding than he'd expected. Then she looked at him directly. Chief Thatcher, I want you to know something. I read Lieutenant Harlow's service record before coming to this workshop. Not because I doubted your competence, but because I make it a practice to understand the history of those I work with. Both ears angled forward and slightly down, a position he hadn't seen before. She wrote 3 commendations for your work in her service jacket. In the last one, written 2 weeks before her death, she stated that you were the finest armor technician she'd ever worked with, and that she trusted you completely with her life. The words hit Gideon like a physical blow. She trusted me, and I killed her, he said, voice barely above a whisper. No, Calith's voice was firm. The combat killed her. The impossible timeline killed her. The pressure to prioritize speed over safety killed her. You were a tool used improperly, Chief Thatcher. That is not the same as being the cause. Gideon wanted to argue, wanted to explain that it didn't matter what tools had been misused. He'd been the one holding them. But before he could speak, something unexpected happened. The armor spoke. Wearer Vera. The voice emanated from the armor itself, a synthesized tone that somehow managed to sound concerned. This unit must provide relevant historical data. Gideon stared. In 35 years of working with Sentinel-class armor, he'd never heard one initiate communication. They responded to commands, displayed diagnostic information, but they didn't just talk. Sentinel-7? Calith didn't sound surprised. What data? This unit shares manufacturing lineage with Sentinel-4, previously assigned to operator Bridget Harlow. During production integration, partial memory architecture was transferred between units. This unit possesses fragmented records of operator Harlow's final mission. The workshop went very still. Show me, Gideon said, voice rough. The armor's holographic display flickered, then resolved into a playback view. Bridget's perspective, looking down at her armor's chest plate. Gideon's own voice came through, tinny from the recording. All systems showing green, Lieutenant. You're good to go. Bridget's hands, he remembered those hands, steady and capable, flexed once, testing response time. Feels solid, Chief. Good work as always. The perspective shifted as she moved toward the deployment bay. Then a jump cut. Combat. Plasma fire streaking across a dark landscape. Bridget taking cover behind a burned-out vehicle, returning fire with practiced precision. Then her chest plate sparked. Warning indicators flashed across her HUD. She looked down, saw the energy lattice failure spreading, and her voice came through tight with understanding. Armor breach, neural feedback imminent. And in those final seconds, instead of screaming or cursing or blaming, Bridget Harlow triggered her armor's black box recorder and spoke clearly into it. This is Lieutenant Bridget Harlow, final entry. If Chief Thatcher accesses this record, Chief, listen to me. This isn't your fault. I hid symptoms. Told you I felt fine when the armor was pulling at my neural connection during pre-deployment. I knew something was off, and I didn't say anything because we were on a timeline, and I didn't want to be the one who slowed down the mission. Her breathing was getting labored, pain creeping into her voice, but she pushed through. You trusted me to report honestly. That trust was right. It's what makes you a good tech. Don't lose it because I failed to live up to it. The armor failed because I lied, not because you did shoddy work. Do you hear me? Not your fault. She coughed and the recording crackled with interference. You taught me everything I know about integrity in this work. Made me a better soldier, better person. Whatever happens next, and I think we both know what happens next, you honor that by trusting again. By teaching the next young tech who walks into your workshop. By not letting this break what's good in you. Her hands were shaking now in the recording. The warnings were critical, screaming, Trust again, Chief, please. Bridget Harlow, signing off. The recording ended. Gideon stood frozen, unable to process what he'd just heard. 4 months. 4 months he'd carried the weight of her death, certain it was his failure that killed her. And all that time she'd left him a message he'd never known existed, trying to give him the absolution he couldn't give himself. He realized his face was wet. Chief Thatcher. Kayla's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. She tried to protect you from exactly what you've been doing to yourself. She lied to me, Gideon managed, voice breaking. About the symptoms, the neural connection issues. If she'd told me the truth, I would have done exactly what you're doing now, taken the time necessary, done it right. Kayla stepped down from the diagnostic platform, and suddenly she was right there, close enough that he could see the concern in those violet eyes. And she knew that. That is why she said nothing, because she made the same mistake you are afraid of making. She prioritized speed over safety. Her choice, her responsibility. Gideon couldn't speak. 4 months of guilt, of second-guessing every decision, of being unable to trust himself with another life. And here was Bridget Harlow from beyond the grave, telling him it wasn't his fault, telling him to trust again. "I don't know if I can," he whispered. One ear shifted forward, the other angled down. "Chief Thatcher, I am standing here in damaged armor, having just sacrificed my career advancement to ensure you have time to work properly. I am trusting you with my life, not despite your history with Lieutenant Harlow, but because of it. You know the cost of failure now. You will not rush. You will not cut corners. You will do this work right." She held his gaze steadily. "The question is not whether you can trust yourself. The question is whether you can accept that I trust you. Completely." Gideon looked at her, this alien commander who'd walked into his workshop carrying damage that could kill her, and a faith in him that he didn't deserve but desperately needed. Who'd just been given the gift of Bridget's final words, specifically asking him to trust again. He thought about those words, about integrity, about honoring the dead by living right, not by dying slowly from guilt. He wiped his face, straightened his shoulders, and nodded. "Yes, ma'am, I can accept that." He moved back to the diagnostic controls, hands steady despite everything. "Let's get you fixed up properly. No shortcuts, no compromises. We do this right." That, Kayla said, a hint of something that might have been a smile in her voice, is precisely what I hope to hear. The armor purred, an actual sound, deep and pleased, vibrating against the platform. Gideon paused. "Did your armor just purr?" Sentinel units bond emotionally with their operators and technicians. "It approves of you." One ear twitched, amusement he was starting to recognize. "Consider it a favorable review." A new voice chimed in, synthetic and cheerful in a way that suggested its programmers had a cruel sense of humor. Romantic approval detected, cross-species bonding protocols initializing. Gideon closed his eyes. "Please tell me that's not your armor talking now." "No, that would be the Murphy translation protocol. It has personality quirks." Kayla sounded resigned. "It also has a tendency toward inappropriate relationship assessments. I'm turning it off. I have tried. It resists." There was definitely amusement in her voice now. "I believe it may be slightly defective." Defective is a hurtful term, Gideon human. I prefer independently minded. Despite everything, the stress, the fear, the weight of Bridget's message still settling into his bones, Gideon felt something unexpected happen. He laughed. Just a short bark of genuine amusement, but it felt like the first time he'd laughed in 4 months. Maybe it was. Both of Kayla's ears did that forward twitch thing, and he realized she was pleased she'd made him laugh. "Okay," he said, feeling something in his chest that had been locked tight beginning to loosen. "Okay, let's do this. Commander Vera, I need you back on the platform. We're starting with the kinetic shell. Straightforward work, just tedious. I'll need you to remain still while I map the fracture patterns and prepare the molecular bonding substrate." "Understood." She resumed her position in the diagnostic field. "Chief Thatcher, one question before we begin." "Ma'am, this repair process, will it require close proximity for extended periods?" Gideon pulled up the procedural requirements. "For the energy lattice and neural interface layers, yes. The work requires precision measurement at distances of less than 15 centimeters, and I'll need to monitor your biometric feedback in real time." "Why?" Both ears elevated slightly. "Among my people, we have a tradition when undergoing armor bonding or repair. We remain close to the technician throughout the process. Physical proximity demonstrates commitment and trust. It can be uncomfortable for those not familiar with VLAR customs." How close are we talking? Close enough to feel each other's body heat. Close enough that breath mingles. She paused. Your discomfort will be noted and accepted. However, my presence is required for optimal armor response. The Sentinel system bonds to intention as much as technical procedure. It must feel that both of us are fully committed to the repair. Gideon thought about that, about standing close enough to an alien commander to feel her breath for potentially 8 hours straight, about the kind of trust that required, the vulnerability, about how Bridget had asked him to trust again. Ma'am, I've spent 35 years elbow deep in alien technology that could kill me if I sneezed wrong. I think I can handle close quarters with someone who's trusting me with her life. Then we understand each other. Kaleth settled into position, perfectly motionless. Begin when ready, Chief Thatcher. Gideon initialized the repair sequence, watching as holographic guides overlaid the damaged areas, mapping the molecular structure he'd need to rebuild. This was the part he loved, the pure technical challenge of it, the precision work where everything else fell away and there was only the armor, the tools, and the problem to solve. He moved to stand directly in front of Kaleth, close enough to see the faint luminescence in her eyes that seemed to be a Velar trait, close enough to feel the heat radiating from armor that was still warm from combat and damage, close enough to understand that this was as much an act of faith as it was technical work. Here we go, he said quietly, and placed his hands on the fractured chest plate. The armor resonated with approval, a deep vibration spreading through his fingers. And despite everything, the fear, the grief, the weight of responsibility, Gideon Thatcher felt something he hadn't felt in 4 months. He felt ready. The first layer took 97 minutes. Gideon worked with the methodical precision of a man who'd learned that speed killed and patience saved lives. His hands moved across the fractured kinetic shell, applying molecular bonding substrate in hair-thin lines that glowed briefly before settling into the armor's structure. Each application required exact pressure, exact temperature, exact timing. Too fast and the bond wouldn't take. Too slow and the substrate would crystallize before integration. Kaleth stood motionless throughout, close enough that he could count her heartbeats in the subtle rise and fall of her damaged chest plate. She didn't speak, didn't shift weight, didn't do anything that might disrupt his concentration. The discipline was impressive. Most humans couldn't hold that kind of stillness for 5 minutes, let alone 97. One ear rotated occasionally, tracking sounds in the workshop he had stopped noticing years ago. The hum of diagnostic equipment, the whisper of ventilation systems, the distant rumble of base operations continuing outside their small bubble of focused intensity. Substrate application complete for kinetic shell, Gideon announced, stepping back to check his work. The holographic overlay showed perfect bonding across all fracture lines. Now we wait 15 minutes for full molecular integration, then I can stress test the seal. 15 minutes. Kaleth's voice was steady, but he caught the slight tension in it. Not pain exactly. Awareness of time passing. Can't rush chemistry, ma'am. The molecules need time to find their proper lattice positions. He pulled up the stress analysis protocols, preparing for the next phase. How are you holding up? Any numbness, tingling, unusual sensations from the neural interface? Mild discomfort at the fracture points. Nothing concerning. She paused. May I ask a question, Chief Thatcher? Of course. The molecular bonding technique you're using, I've reviewed standard Sentinel repair protocols. This approach is not listed in the technical documentation. Gideon smiled slightly, the first time in months that expression had felt natural. That's because I developed it. Standard protocol uses thermal welding for kinetic shell fractures. Faster, easier, perfectly adequate for most situations. But thermal welding creates stress points at the weld boundaries. Under repeated combat loading, those stress points can propagate into new fractures. He highlighted the bonding pattern on the display. Molecular bonding takes longer, requires more precision, but it integrates at the atomic level. The repair becomes as strong as the original material. Stronger, actually, because we can align the molecular structure more precisely than factory production allows. So you're not simply repairing my armor. You're improving it. Small improvements, but yes. He ran a preliminary integrity scan, watching the numbers climb steadily. Every repair is an opportunity to make the equipment better than it was. Most techs don't bother because it takes extra time. I figure if someone's trusting me with their life, I should give them the best possible outcome, not just the fastest. Calith was quiet for a moment. That is admirable, and explains why Lieutenant Harlow spoke so highly of your work and her commendations. The mention of Bridget still hurt, but the pain was different now. Cleaner somehow, after hearing her message. Less like guilt and more like grief, which was painful but honest. Bridget believed in doing things right, Gideon said quietly. She deserved better than a rushed repair job. I'm making sure you get what she should have gotten. I am grateful. Both ears angled forward and down, not just for the quality of work, but for your honesty about the timeline. Many would have simply obeyed orders and hoped for the best. Hope isn't a repair strategy. Gideon checked the integration timer, 8 minutes remaining. And I've learned that hoping for the best usually means planning for failure. Murphy's voice chimed in with aggressively cheerful timing. Philosophical bonding detected. Relationship depth increasing. Recommend discussing shared interests and childhood memories. Murphy, I swear I'm going to reprogram you into a doorstop, Gideon muttered. That would be a waste of my considerable talents, Gideon human. One ear twitched upward, amusement he was certain now. In Murphy's defense, it has successfully reduced ambient stress levels through comedy. Perhaps its inappropriate suggestions serve a therapeutic purpose. Stockholm Syndrome. You've developed Stockholm Syndrome for a malfunctioning AI. I prefer to think of it as adaptive tolerance. There was definitely a smile in her voice now, even if her face remained professionally neutral. The timer reached 0. Gideon moved back into position, running stress analysis probes across the repaired kinetic shell. The armor responded beautifully, integrity at 103% of factory specifications. The molecular bonding had worked perfectly. Layer 1 complete and verified, he announced. Your kinetic shell is now stronger than the day it was manufactured. Ready for Layer 2? Proceed. The energy lattice was going to be harder. Gideon pulled up the detailed schematic, studying the network of power distribution nodes that spread across the armor's inner surface, like a nervous system made of light. 12 nodes completely dead, 20 more showing degraded performance. Each node needed to be individually recalibrated, then integrated back into the overall network. And unlike the kinetic shell, this work couldn't be done from the outside. He was going to need access to the armor's interior systems, which meant getting very close to Calith herself. Commander, I need to explain the next phase. Gideon highlighted the lattice structure on the display. The energy distribution nodes are located on the armor's inner surface, in direct contact with your skin. To repair them, I need to access the internal systems through these maintenance ports. He indicated a series of small access panels along the armor's sides and back. That means I'll be working with my hands inside your armor, sometimes within millimeters of your skin. The calibration process also requires your active participation. I'll need you to guide the energy flow through the lattice while I make adjustments. It's intimate work. One ear rotated back, the other remained forward. Consideration, maybe, or concern. How intimate? I'll need to place my hands here, here, and here. He indicated positions along her ribs, shoulder blades, and lower back. And you'll need to consciously direct your body's bioelectric field to help the nodes sync properly. The armor will create a temporary connection between your nervous system and my touch. You'll feel what I'm doing. I'll feel echoes of your biometric state. A neural bridge. A temporary limited one. Nothing like the full integration the armor has with you, but enough that we'll be sharing sensory feedback during calibration. He met her eyes. I won't see your thoughts or memories, but I might get impressions, emotional states, physical sensations, and you'll get the same from me. It's unavoidable with this type of repair. Calith considered this. And this is necessary? For a proper repair, yes. There are shortcuts that avoid the neural bridge, but they result in suboptimal lattice performance. Your armor would work, but energy distribution would be inefficient. Under heavy combat stress, that inefficiency could be fatal. Then we proceed properly. She said it without hesitation, and Gideon felt a surge of respect for her courage. I trust you, Chief Thatcher, both with the technical work and with what you might perceive during the process. Thank you, ma'am. He meant it. I'll try to keep my thoughts professional. That will be difficult given the romantic tension measurements I'm detecting, Murphy announced helpfully. Murphy, I'm going to pull your processor core and use it as a paperweight. Violent ideation noted. Still therapeutic. Both ears did that amused twitch again, and Gideon realized she was deliberately not suppressing her reaction to Murphy's commentary. She was letting him see her amusement, giving him permission to find humor in the situation, even as they prepared for the intensely personal work ahead. It was kind of her. He appreciated the gesture more than he could articulate. All right, he moved to her right side, opening the first maintenance access panel. Warm air flowed out, carrying that cinnamon-like scent he'd noticed earlier. I'm going to start with the nodes along your right lateral section. This will feel strange at first, like someone touching you through a layer of water. Let me know if anything becomes uncomfortable. Understood. Gideon slid his hand into the access port, feeling the armor's interior surface, still warm from her body heat. His fingers found the first damaged node, a small crystalline structure embedded in the armor's inner layer. He triggered his diagnostic glove, and the node lit up weakly, showing the corrupted energy pathways. The moment he began the calibration sequence, awareness bloomed between them. Not touch exactly, more like presence, a sense of another consciousness that wasn't his own. Kayla's heartbeat, steady and strong, her breathing controlled and even. And underneath that, emotions he had no right to perceive. Determination, constant and unyielding as stone. Loneliness, buried deep but present like a cold current under warm surface water. Pride in her soldiers, fierce and protective. And beneath it all, a current of doubt she'd never show on her face. Fear that she wasn't worthy. That Theron's sacrifice had been wasted on someone who couldn't live up to his faith in her. Gideon's chest tightened with recognition. He knew that feeling, had lived with it every day since Bridget. In their shared awareness, he felt Kaleth perceive his reaction, felt her become aware that he understood exactly what she was carrying. Neither of them spoke about it, but the understanding passed between them like a current in deep water, acknowledged without words. He focused on the technical work, recalibrating the energy pathways, coaxing the damaged nodes back to functionality. Kaleth helped, directing her bioelectric field with practiced precision, guiding the flow of energy as he made his adjustments. They fell into a rhythm, his hands working, her energy responding, the armor humming its approval as damaged systems came back online one by one. You're good at this, Gideon murmured, watching a particularly stubborn node finally sync properly. The bioelectric control, most people struggle with it. Valar children are taught energy meditation from age 5. Kaleth's voice was calm, but he sensed the slight increase in her heart rate. Talking while maintaining this level of control required serious concentration. We learn to sense and direct our body's electromagnetic fields before we learn advanced mathematics. It's considered foundational to our culture. Useful skill for armor integration. That was the intention when Sentinel systems were designed. Human-Velar hybrid technology, combining Earth's material science with Velar energy manipulation. She paused. The irony is that many of my people see the armor as a corruption of our traditions, using sacred meditation techniques for warfare. Gideon moved to the next cluster of nodes, feeling the warm interior of the armor against his forearm. What do you think? I think meditation without purpose is self-indulgence. If the techniques can protect lives, save worlds, build bridges between species, that seems more sacred than sitting in isolation contemplating personal enlightenment. Her conviction came through clearly, both in her voice and in their connection. But I am considered radical among my people for volunteering for Earth service. My family has not spoken to me in 8 months. The loneliness he'd sensed earlier suddenly made more sense. She wasn't just isolated on an alien world. She was cut off from her entire culture, her family, everything familiar. All to prove a point about unity that half her people rejected and half the humans didn't trust. And she bore it without complaint, without asking for sympathy, because she believed the cause was worth the cost. For what it's worth, Gideon said quietly, I think what you're doing takes more courage than most people possess. Standing between two worlds, trusted by neither, believing anyway. He searched for the right word. That's exceptional. In their link, he felt her surprise, then something warmer. Gratitude maybe, or recognition that someone finally understood. Thank you, Chief Thatcher. That means more than you know. He finished the right lateral section, closed the access panel, and moved to her back. This was going to be trickier. The nodes along her spine required him to reach deeper into the armor's interior, his hand sliding between the inner surface and her back, millimeters from her skin. This next part might be uncomfortable, he warned. I'll be working very close to your spine. You'll feel pressure, maybe some heat from the calibration tools. Tell me immediately if it's too much. I understand, proceed. Gideon opened the back access panel and carefully slid his hand into the narrow space. The armor's interior was form-fitted to Calith's body, leaving barely enough room for his fingers. He could feel her breathing, the slight movement of her back with each inhalation, the warmth of her through the thin armor lining. Their connection intensified with the increased proximity. Suddenly he was aware of more than just her emotions. He caught fragments of sensation, the weight of the armor on her shoulders, the ache in her legs from standing so still, the sharp point of pain at her lower back where one of the fractures must have bruised her during combat. And she was perceiving him too. He sensed her awareness of his focus, his careful precision, the way he was treating her armor like something precious rather than just equipment, his respect for her, his growing admiration for her courage. It was intensely intimate, this sharing of awareness, more personal than touch. There was nowhere to hide, no way to pretend. They were simply known to each other in a way that normally took years of friendship to achieve. Gideon found the damaged nodes and began the delicate work of recalibration. Calith guided the energy flow, her control even more precise now that their link was stronger. They didn't need to speak. He'd think about what he needed, she'd sense it and respond, the armor synchronizing with their combined intention. 20 minutes into the back section work, disaster nearly struck. One of the nodes along her lower spine wasn't just damaged, it was actively degrading, breaking down in real time from stress fractures that had been slowly expanding over weeks. When Gideon tried to recalibrate it, the node suddenly spiked, sending a jolt of uncontrolled energy directly into Calith's nervous system. She gasped, back arching, and in their shared awareness, Gideon felt a sharp electric pain that lanced up her spine. He jerked his hand back instinctively, breaking contact. "Commander, are you all right?" Calith was breathing hard, both ears flat against her skull. "I'm functional. What happened?" Cascading node failure. The damage was worse than diagnostics showed. Gideon pulled up the real-time scan, cursing under his breath. "That node is actively breaking down. If I'd pushed the calibration, it could have caused a neural feedback cascade." Just like Bridget, the thought hit him like a physical blow. He'd almost done it again, almost pushed too hard, trusted the diagnostics too much, and hurt someone who was trusting him completely. His hands started to shake. In their fading connection, Calith sensed his surge of fear and guilt, felt him spiraling toward panic. "Chief Thatcher," her voice was firm, cutting through his rising anxiety. "Stop. Breathe. You caught it in time. I am unharmed." But you did not. You felt the instability and reacted immediately. Your instinct saved me." She turned her head as much as the armor would allow, meeting his eyes. "This is precisely why you required 8 hours instead of 4. So you would have time to find problems like this before they became critical. You are doing exactly what you promised. Working carefully, catching errors, protecting me." Gideon took a shaky breath, then another. She was right. The system was working. His caution, her trust, the methodical approach, it had all combined to catch a problem that could have been fatal. "I need to replace that node entirely," he said, forcing his voice steady. "It's too degraded to repair." "That'll add another 40 minutes to this layer. Then we take 40 minutes. No hesitation, complete faith." He nodded, grateful beyond words, and reached for the replacement node assembly. His hands were steadier now, centered by her unwavering confidence. The replacement was painstaking work. He had to carefully extract the degraded node without damaging surrounding systems, prepare the mounting surface, integrate the new node into the existing lattice structure, and calibrate it to match her specific bioelectric signature, all while maintaining their link so she could guide the energy flow properly. They worked in focused silence, communication happening via their connection rather than words. When he needed her to channel energy left, she sensed the need and responded. When she felt a connection wasn't quite right, He perceived her doubt and rechecked his work. It was the most collaborative repair he'd ever done. Usually techs worked alone, maybe with verbal guidance from the armor's operator. This was something else entirely. A true partnership where the boundaries between his expertise and her awareness blurred into unified purpose. The new node finally locked into place, integrating smoothly with the lattice network. Gideon ran verification sequences, watching the energy flow normalize across the entire back section. Replacement successful. Your spine section is now operating at 107% of factory specifications. He withdrew his hand carefully, giving her nervous system time to adjust to the loss of direct contact. How do you feel? Better than I have in weeks, Kaleth admitted. I did not realize how much strain that degraded node was placing on my system until it was gone. The difference is remarkable. You've been fighting with compromised equipment for a long time, haven't you? Silence. Then quietly, yes. Why didn't you report for maintenance? For the same reason Lieutenant Harlow did not report her symptoms. Because I could not afford to appear weak during my probationary period with Earth forces. Because admitting the armor was failing felt like admitting I was failing. One ear drooped slightly. Because I was afraid that if I showed vulnerability, it would confirm what many already believe, that Velar and humans cannot truly work together. Gideon moved around to face her, studying her expression, seeing the weight she'd been carrying, the impossible standards she'd been holding herself to. Commander Vera, can I tell you something? Of course. You and I are both idiots. Both ears snapped upright in surprise. Excuse me? We're both carrying guilt we don't deserve, holding ourselves to standards that would break anyone, refusing help because we think we have to be perfect. He gestured between them. I've been punishing myself for 4 months because I couldn't save Bridget from her own choice to hide symptoms. You've been punishing yourself for months because you can't single-handedly make two species trust each other. We're both trying to carry weights that no one person should bear. Kayla stared at him, then slowly, one ear angled forward while the other tilted back, an expression he hadn't seen before. We are indeed both idiots, she agreed. What do you suggest we do about this condition? How about we start by being honest with each other? You stop pretending you don't need maintenance. I stop pretending I'm fine working alone. We acknowledge that we're both broken in complementary ways and maybe help each other stay functional. An alliance of mutual brokenness. She seemed to consider us. I find that strangely appealing. Right? Murphy chimed in enthusiastically. This is what I've been saying. You two are perfect for each other. Complementary damage patterns create optimal bonding conditions. Murphy, that's actually the most sensible thing you've said all day, Gideon admitted. I know, it's disturbing. Kaleth laughed. A real laugh. Not the polite acknowledgement of humor, but genuine amusement. The sound was surprisingly musical, and in their fading connection, Gideon felt her joy as a warm pulse. All right, alliance of idiots it is, she said. Now you said there's one more section of energy lattice to repair? Left lateral section, yes, should go faster now that I know what to look for. He moved to her left side, opening the access panel. Ready? Proceed, partner. The words settled into the space between them with unexpected weight. Partner. Not just technician and operator. Not commander and subordinate. Partners in this work, in this moment, in understanding what it meant to carry impossible burdens and keep going anyway. Gideon slid his hand into the armor's interior, and their link reformed, familiar now instead of strange. They fell back into that synchronized rhythm, his hands and her energy working in concert, the armor humming its satisfaction as damaged systems came back online. As he worked, Gideon found himself thinking about what Kaleth had said earlier, about meditation needing purpose, about using skills for protection rather than isolation. He'd spent 4 months isolating himself in this workshop, using work as meditation to avoid processing his grief, checking and rechecking equipment, keeping busy, staying alone. It had felt like penance, like the price he needed to pay for failure. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe the real way to honor Bridget wasn't through isolation and punishment, but through connection, through teaching, through taking everything he'd learned from that failure and using it to protect others, to be the tech someone like Kaleth could trust absolutely. In their connection, he felt Kaleth's awareness shift. She'd sensed his emotional revelation, the subtle change in his internal state. She didn't comment on it, just continued guiding energy, giving him space to process while staying present, available without being intrusive. It was exactly what he needed. And somehow, despite having known this woman for less than 3 hours, she understood that. The left lateral section came together smoothly, each node responding well to calibration, the lattice network stabilizing into optimal energy distribution patterns. Gideon worked with increasing confidence, trusting both his skills and the partnership he'd formed with Kalith. When he finally closed the last access panel and stepped back to verify the complete energy lattice repair, the numbers were better than he'd hoped. 112% of factory specifications. The armor's energy distribution was now more efficient than it had been when she first received it. Layer 2 complete, he announced. Your energy lattice is fully operational and significantly improved. Under combat conditions, you'll have better plasma resistance, more effective energy dissipation, and longer operational time between recharges. Outstanding work, Chief Thatcher. Kalith's voice carried genuine warmth. I can feel the difference. The armor responds more smoothly, draws less power for the same output. It's remarkable. That's what happens when you give me time to do things properly. Gideon pulled up the final layer specifications, studying what lay ahead. Which brings us to the neural interface. This is the most delicate work and the most critical. I need you to understand what's involved. He highlighted the neural interface structure on the display, an intricate web of contact points that connected directly to Kalith's nervous system, allowing her to control the armor as naturally as her own body. The neural interface has hairline fractures in 3 critical pathways. To repair them, I need to work directly with your nervous system while you're fully conscious and aware. I'll be placing calibration contacts along your spine, and you'll need to actively maintain neural pathway stability while I seal the fractures. He met her eyes. This is going to hurt. Not severely, but there will be discomfort. Sharp tingles, muscle spasms, possibly temporary numbness in your extremities. Our connection will be at maximum intensity. We'll be more aware of each other than we've been so far. And it requires absolute stillness. Any movement during the sealing process could cause permanent nerve damage. Kalith listened carefully, then nodded. I understand the risks. How long will this phase take? Approximately 2.5 hours, possibly 3 if we encounter complications. He paused. Commander, I need you to be absolutely certain you can handle this. If you have any doubts about your ability to remain still through discomfort, tell me now. We can wait, adjust the approach, whatever you need. Chief Thatcher, her voice was steady as bedrock. I have trusted you for the past 3 hours. I have felt your integrity, your skill, your care for my well-being. I am certain of my choice. Proceed with the neural interface repair. Gideon felt something warm settle in his chest, trust, freely given and absolutely meant. It was a gift he hadn't expected and didn't take lightly. Then let's finish this properly, he said. Final layer, no shortcuts. We do it right. The Sentinel-7 armor resonated with what could only be described as pride. They were almost there. The neural interface calibration contacts felt like ice against Gideon's fingers. He'd placed 17 of them so far, small crystalline sensors that adhered to the armor's interior surface directly over the pathways connecting to Kalith's spine. Each one needed precise positioning. Millimeters off and the calibration would fail. Get it right and they'd form a network that could map her entire nervous system, identify the damaged pathways, and guide his repair tools with surgical precision. Get it wrong and she'd spend the rest of her life unable to walk. No pressure. Contact 17 in place, he announced, his voice steady despite the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. How are you feeling, Commander? Functional. Kalith's tone was controlled, but in their connection, now operating at near maximum intensity, Gideon could sense the truth beneath the word. Discomfort spreading across her back like cold fire. Muscle tension from standing absolutely still for the past 2 hours and 40 minutes. Determination strong enough to bend steel. And underneath it all, complete faith in him. That faith terrified and steadied him in equal measure. I'm going to activate the calibration network now, he said. This is where it's going to get uncomfortable. You'll feel each contact point light up, and your nervous system is going to want to react. Don't let it. Stay perfectly still, no matter what you feel. Understood. Gideon initialized the sequence. The contacts lit up in cascade, pale blue light spreading across the network like neurons firing. In their link, he felt Calith's sharp intake of breath, not audible but visceral in his awareness. Felt the electric sensation spreading across her back, down her spine, branching into her limbs. It wasn't pain exactly, but it was deeply unsettling. Like her entire body was being mapped by invisible hands that knew her more intimately than she knew herself. She didn't move, didn't even tremble. The woman had discipline that would make a statue jealous. The neural map resolved on his display, showing the 3 damaged pathways in stark relief. 2 along her upper spine, 1 at the base. Hairline fractures barely visible, but enough to cause catastrophic failure under the wrong conditions. If she'd taken another solid hit in combat before getting this repaired, the feedback cascade could have paralyzed her instantly. Or killed her, just like Bridget. Gideon forced the thought away. This wasn't Bridget's situation. He wasn't being rushed. He had time, proper equipment, and a partner who trusted him to work carefully. Everything was different. Everything except the stakes. "I've got the map," he said. 3 fractures confirmed, all accessible. "I'm going to start with the upper pathways first. They're less critical, which gives us a chance to test the procedure before tackling the base spine fracture." Logical approach. Calith's voice remained steady. "Proceed." He selected the sealing tool, a device that looked like a fountain pen designed by someone who'd never seen a fountain pen, all angular crystalline structures and microfilaments. It would inject nanoscale repair material directly into the damaged neural pathways, guided by the calibration network. Precision work at the cellular level. One wrong move, and he'd be repairing brain damage instead of armor connections. Gideon took a slow breath, centered himself, and positioned the tool against the first fracture point. Beginning seal on upper pathway alpha. You're going to feel a sharp tingle, then warmth spreading along your right shoulder and arm. Completely normal. Do not react. He triggered the tool. Via their connection, he felt Calith's reaction in real time. The sharp electric jolt as the repair nanites entered her neural pathway. The spreading warmth that was actually her body's immune response, recognizing foreign material and deciding whether to accept or reject it. The brief moment of numbness in her right hand as the pathway temporarily shut down during repair. She didn't move, didn't gasp, barely even shifted her breathing pattern. But Gideon felt everything she was experiencing, and he marveled at her control. Most humans would have flinched. Most trained soldiers would have tensed. She simply accepted the sensation and remained still, trusting the process, trusting him. The first seal took 8 minutes. When it completed, the pathway showed solid and stable on his display, no longer fractured. Neural signal strength at 104% of baseline. "Alpha pathway sealed and verified," he announced. "How's your right arm?" Calith flexed her fingers experimentally. Full sensation and control restored. The numbness is gone. "Good. That's exactly what we want." He repositioned for the second upper pathway. "Beta pathway next. This one connects to your left shoulder. Same process, same sensations on the opposite side." "Ready." The second seal went as smoothly as the first. Calith endured the discomfort without complaint. Her stillness absolute. Her trust unwavering. Via their link, Gideon could sense her mental discipline. She was using some kind of velar meditation technique, accepting each sensation as it came without resisting or tensing against it. It was impressive and humbling. Here was someone experiencing genuine discomfort and choosing to remain calm through sheer force of will, all because she believed he knew what he was doing. He couldn't let her down. The second seal completed. Both upper pathways now showed solid and stable, which left the critical one. Gideon pulled up the scan of the base spine fracture, studying it from every angle. This pathway carried the primary neural integration signals, the commands that let Calith control the armor as naturally as her own body. It was also the pathway most vulnerable to catastrophic feedback if the repair went wrong. This was the one that had killed Bridget. A fracture in exactly this location sealed too quickly, failing under combat stress. His hands started to shake. "Chief Thatcher." Calith's voice cut through his rising anxiety. "I can feel your fear. Talk to me." He set down the sealing tool before his trembling could worsen. This fracture, base spine, primary integration pathway, it's identical to the one that failed on Bridget's armor. Silence. Then gently, are you able to continue? Was he? Could he trust himself to seal this fracture properly, knowing that Bridget had died from this exact repair going wrong? Could he push past the fear and the guilt and the certainty that he was about to fail again? In their connection, he felt Calith's awareness shift. She was reading his emotional state, understanding the depth of his doubt. And instead of losing faith in him, she did something unexpected. She shared her own fear. It came via their link like a confession whispered in darkness. Her terror that she wasn't good enough to justify Theron's sacrifice. Her doubt that she could truly bridge the gap between human and Valar. Her bone-deep loneliness of being cut off from her family, her culture, everything familiar. The crushing weight of trying to prove something that half the universe thought was impossible. She was showing him that she understood, that she carried doubts as heavy as his, that she was afraid too, but she chose trust anyway. Chief Thatcher, she said quietly, I am terrified that I will fail everyone who believes in me, that Theron died for nothing, that this alliance will collapse and prove my family right, that I was a fool to think unity was possible. She paused, and he felt her gathering courage. But I choose to trust you anyway, not because I'm certain you won't fail, but because I'm certain you will do everything in your power to succeed. That's all anyone can ask. It's all I ask. The words settled into Gideon's chest like a key turning in a lock that had been jammed for 4 months. She wasn't asking for perfection. She was asking for his best effort, for him to try, knowing failure was possible, choosing courage over certainty. Bridget had asked for the same thing in her final message. Trust again. Try again. Don't let fear paralyze you. Okay, he said, voice rough with emotion. Okay, I can do this. He picked up the sealing tool, hands steadier now. Not perfectly steady. He wasn't sure they'd ever be that again. But steady enough. Base spine pathway, he announced. Primary integration neural connection. This is the big one, Commander. The sensation will be more intense than the previous two. You'll feel it throughout your entire body, possibly some muscle spasms in your legs. Whatever happens, do not move. Can you do that? Yes. No hesitation, complete faith. Gideon positioned the tool with exquisite care, double-checking alignment, verifying the calibration network, running every safety protocol twice. Then he triggered the seal. The reaction was immediate and intense. In their connection, he felt the repair nanites flooding into Calith's primary neural pathway, felt her body's startled response to the intrusion. Electric sensation cascaded down her spine, branched into every limb, made her muscles want to spasm and her body want to jerk away from the source. She didn't move. Her legs trembled. He felt the tremor via their link, felt her fighting to control it, felt her breathing want to quicken and her forcing it to stay slow and even. Felt every ounce of her discipline being channeled into remaining absolutely still, while her nervous system screamed for her to move, and she held. Seconds stretched into minutes. The seal was taking longer than the previous two. The fracture was deeper, the damage more complex. Gideon monitored the progress with obsessive attention, ready to abort at the first sign of complications. The nanites were integrating properly. The pathway was accepting the repair. Neural signal strength was climbing steadily toward baseline. They were going to make it. Then the power fluctuated. Just a brief dip, barely half a second, but it was enough. The calibration network flickered, and one of the microfractures Gideon hadn't detected, a stress fracture in the armor's energy lattice, so small it hadn't shown on diagnostics, suddenly propagated. The armor's internal systems registered the new damage and automatically attempted to compensate by rerouting power, which meant pulling energy from the neural interface seal currently in progress. The sealing tool spiked. Warning indicators exploded across Gideon's display. Neural pathway destabilizing. Repair integrity compromised. Catastrophic failure imminent. This was it. This was the moment Bridget's armor had failed. This was where everything went wrong, and someone he was trying to protect ended up dead or paralyzed because he'd missed something. Trusted diagnostics that lied, failed to account for the unexpected. Gideon had perhaps 2 seconds to make a choice. Option 1, Abort the seal immediately. Pull the tool, accept minor neural damage, but prevent catastrophic failure. Safe, conservative, the choice Fear wanted him to make. Option 2, push through, compensate for the power fluctuation manually, finish the seal despite the instability. Risky, potentially fatal, the choice Bridget's rushed repair had made. Option 3, trust. Trust the partnership he'd built with Calith over the past 4 hours. Trust their connection. Trust that together they could handle this. Commander? His voice was sharp, urgent. Power fluctuation detected. The seal is destabilizing. I need you to manually stabilize your neural pathway. Use your bioelectric control. Channel energy directly to the seal point. Can you do that? Via their link, he felt Calith's instant understanding. Felt her shift from passive endurance to active participation. Felt her drawing on those Velar meditation techniques she'd trained in since childhood, consciously directing her body's electromagnetic field. Energy flowed, not from the armor's compromised systems, but from Calith herself, channeling her own bioelectric field to power the repair. It was dangerous. Using her own life force to seal neural pathways was exactly the kind of feedback loop that could cause permanent damage. But it was also their only option in the 2 seconds they had to make a choice. Gideon adjusted the sealing tool on the fly, compensating for the new energy source, recalibrating in real time. His hands moved with absolute precision, guided by 35 years of experience and the perfect trust that Calith would hold her end of the partnership. The neural pathway stabilized. The seal continued, now powered by the combined effort of human technical expertise and Velar energy control. 2 species, 2 skill sets, working in perfect synchronization to solve a problem neither could handle alone. The fracture sealed completely. Neural signal strength hit 108% and held. The armor resonated, deep and satisfied and proud. Gideon pulled the tool away carefully, hands shaking now that the crisis had passed. In their connection, he felt Calith's exhaustion. She'd just channeled a significant amount of her own bioelectric energy into that seal. It had cost her, but she was still standing, still whole, still alive. Seal complete, he said, voice hoarse. All 3 neural pathways repaired and verified. You're going to be fine, Commander. Kayla swayed slightly, the first time she'd moved in over 3 hours, and Gideon instinctively reached out to steady her. His hands found her shoulders, and even through the armor he could feel her trembling. I need, she said carefully, to sit down. Now. Yes, absolutely. Gideon guided her to the workshop's bench, helping her ease down. That was incredible, what you just did, channeling your bioelectric field during active neural repair. I've never seen anything like it. Velar meditation technique. Her voice was tired but steady. We're taught to direct our energy fields for healing. I simply applied it to armor repair. You saved the seal. When the power fluctuated, the whole thing could have cascaded into catastrophic failure. You prevented that. He met her eyes. We prevented that. Together. In their fading connection, the calibration contacts were powering down now that the repair was complete. He felt her understanding, felt her recognize what had just happened. They'd faced the exact scenario that killed Bridget, and they'd survived it. Not because either of them was perfect, but because they trusted each other enough to work as true partners. The armor, Kayla said. Is it fully operational? Gideon pulled up the complete diagnostic readout. All 3 layers sealed and verified. Kinetic shell at 103%. Energy lattice at 112%. Neural interface at 108%. Better than factory specifications across the board, he reported. You're not just repaired, Commander. You're upgraded. The Sentinel-7 armor chimed, and its synthesized voice carried unmistakable satisfaction. Wearers Vera Thatcher, this unit must report significant development. What development? Calith asked. During emergency neural seal procedure, this unit detected unprecedented synchronization between human technician and Velar operator. Integration coefficient of 97.3% achieved. This unit has never recorded such compatibility. The armor paused as if considering its next words. This unit believes you have created something new. Not human methodology, not Velar technique, synthesis, partnership. This unit is Grateful. Silence filled the workshop. Gideon stared at the armor, then at Caliph, then back at the diagnostic readouts showing integration levels that shouldn't be possible. They'd done more than repair armor. They'd proven something neither of their species had quite believed, that human and Velar working together could achieve results impossible for either alone. Romantic achievement unlocked, Murphy announced cheerfully. Would you like to know the statistical probability of successful long-term partnership? Murphy, shut up, Gideon and Caliph said in perfect unison. Then they looked at each other and laughed. Tired, genuine laughter that came from relief and shared experience, and the kind of understanding that only formed under pressure. Outside the workshop, base alarms blared to life. The Carthex assault was beginning. Caliph stood immediately, exhaustion vanishing under training and duty. How long until I'm combat ready? You're combat ready now, Gideon said. But Commander, you just channeled significant bioelectric energy. Your body needs... My body will rest when my soldiers are safe. She moved to the diagnostic platform, testing the armor's response. Movement was fluid, perfect, better than before. Chief Thatcher, you've given me the tools. Now I need to use them. She was right and he knew it, but that didn't make it easier to watch her walk toward danger he couldn't protect her from. Wait, he moved to his workbench, pulled out something he'd been carrying for 4 months. Bridget's honor token, a small piece of her armor he'd kept as a reminder of his failure. Time to turn it into something else. He handed it to Caliph. Bridget Harlow would have wanted you to have this. For courage. For remembering that failure teaches us, but it doesn't define us. Caliph accepted the token, both ears shifting to that position he now recognized as deep emotion. I will carry it with honor. And Chief Thatcher, Gideon, I will return. We still have partnership to prove. Caliph, her name felt right in his mouth. Give them hell and come back safe. She nodded once, then turned toward the door. The armor resonated one last time as she passed through and into the chaos of battle beyond. Gideon stood alone in the workshop, feeling the absence like a physical thing. Their connection was gone now, severed. But the partnership remained, built on trust earned through shared crisis. He pulled up the tactical feed, watching as Commander Caliph Vera took her position in the command center. Watched as her brilliant tactical mind combined with enhanced armor capabilities to turn the defensive battle. Watched as human and Valar forces fought together under her coordination, proving that unity worked when given the chance. The assault was fierce. Carthex forces pushed hard against the northern perimeter, testing the defensive grid, probing for weaknesses. But Caliph was everywhere at once, coordinating fire patterns, repositioning units, anticipating enemy movements with the kind of tactical brilliance that came from experience and enhanced situational awareness. Gideon saw the moment when her upgraded armor made the difference. A Carthex plasma barrage that would have overwhelmed her old energy lattice dispersed harmlessly across her chest plate, the improved nodes distributing the impact so efficiently that she barely slowed. She used the opening to coordinate a devastating counterattack, catching the enemy formation in a crossfire that sent them reeling. Sergeant Brennick's voice came over the tactical channel. Commander, they're falling back. Grid 7 is secure. Maintain defensive posture. Caliph's voice was calm and controlled. Do not pursue. Let them withdraw and regroup on our terms. The Carthex assault broke after 47 minutes. Enemy forces withdrew in disorder, having achieved nothing except confirming that Edwards Velar base was far better defended than they'd anticipated. 0 casualties on the base side. 3 near misses that could have been fatal without Caliph's tactical coordination. Gideon closed his eyes and breathed. She'd done it. They'd done it. The repair had held. The partnership had worked. Everything he'd promised, everything they'd built together in those intense hours of shared trust, it had all paid off. 3 weeks later, the workshop door opened during a quiet afternoon shift. Caliph walked in, this time without damaged armor. Behind her came a young Valar officer, nervous and uncertain, wearing brand new Sentinel armor that clearly needed initial calibration. The young officer's ears were rotating anxiously, a tell Gideon had learned to read. Chief Thatcher, Caliph said, formal but with warmth in her voice that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago. May I introduce Lieutenant Saren Vec? He's recently arrived from the Valar homeworld and requires armor integration services. The young officer stepped forward, both ears back in uncertainty. I was told That is, Commander Vira recommended. She said you were the only technician who could properly calibrate cross-species armor integration. Gideon looked at the nervous young Valar, seeing himself in that uncertainty, seeing Bridget in that eagerness to prove himself, seeing Calith in that determination to bridge two worlds. The commander is generous with her praise, he said, but if she trusts me with your armor, then I'm honored to do the work. It'll take about 8 hours to do it properly. Can you commit to that timeline? Relief flooded the young officer's features, ears perking forward. Yes, absolutely. I want it done right. Then let's get started. Gideon gestured to the diagnostic platform. Commander Vera, are you staying for the procedure? If you'll have me, I thought I might assist with the bioelectric calibration guidance. Lieutenant Vec is still learning the meditation techniques. It was an excuse and they both knew it. She was here because partnership meant showing up, because trust was built through repeated demonstration, not just one crisis. I'd appreciate the help, Gideon said honestly. As Lieutenant Vec positioned himself on the diagnostic platform, Calith moved to stand beside Gideon, close enough that he could feel her presence, close enough to work in tandem. You know, he said quietly while running the initial diagnostics, 3 weeks ago, you walked in here as a stranger who needed emergency repairs. Now you're here as a partner helping me train the next generation. That's quite a change. 3 weeks ago, I walked in here carrying more weight than anyone being should bear, Calith replied. You taught me that sharing that weight doesn't make us weak. It makes us stronger. We taught each other, Gideon corrected. Lieutenant Vec's armor chimed as the diagnostic sequence completed. The Sentinel-9 unit's synthesized voice was uncertain, tentative. Operator Vec, Technician Thatcher, I am uncertain. My purpose is unclear. I do not know if I am merely equipment or something more. Calith stepped forward, placing a hand gently on the young armor. Then we will teach you, Sentinel-9, as we were taught. You are whatever you choose to become. Your origin does not define you, your choices do. Gideon added, and you've chosen good partners to start with. Lieutenant Vec, let's talk about what proper armor integration looks like when you have time to do it right. As he began explaining the process, watching the young Valar's ears perk up with interest, Gideon felt something he hadn't felt in 4 months. Purpose. Not the hollow kind that came from hiding in work. The real kind, built on connection and trust and the understanding that failure was part of learning, not the end of trying. Outside the window, human and Valar soldiers trained together. Species that had been strangers a year ago, now learning to trust each other one interaction at a time. Building bridges one armor repair at a time. Statistical analysis complete, Murphy announced suddenly. Thatcher-Vera partnership model shows 94.7% probability of long-term success. Recommend continued collaboration. Murphy, Gideon said, for once you might actually be right. I know, it's disturbing. Both of Calith's ears twitched. Amusement and affection and hard-won trust. Gideon smiled, handed her a calibration tool, and together they began the careful work of helping a nervous young officer learn to trust the armor that would keep him alive. The Sentinel-7 armor, resting in standby mode in the corner, hummed with what could only be described as contentment. And in the quiet sounds of the workshop, tools working, equipment humming, quiet conversation between partners who'd learned that the strongest bonds were forged not in perfection, but in choosing each other through the fractures. Gideon Thatcher finally understood what Bridget had tried to tell him. Trust wasn't the absence of fear. It was the choice to continue despite it. He placed his hands on the armor, felt Calith's presence beside him, and continued the work. Always continuing, always building, always trusting that together they could repair what was broken, armor and hearts and the space between worlds. The workshop filled with purpose. Outside, the Nevada sun set over a base where two species were learning to become one force. Inside, the real work continued. One repair at a time, one partnership at a time, one choice to trust at a time. 3 months later, Gideon received official notification. Promotion to Master Chief Warrant Officer with commendation for exceptional cross-species technical collaboration and mentorship. Attached was a note from Colonel Ashford. You were right about the 8 hours. She was right to trust you. Well done. Calith received her captain's insignia the same day, with assignment as permanent liaison for human Valar technical integration programs. Her family sent a message, the first in nearly a year, acknowledging her achievements. They celebrated together in the workshop, over coffee that Gideon had learned to brew the way Caliph preferred it, discussing their next project, a training program for cross-species armor tech teams. "We've proven it works," Caliph said, studying the curriculum outline. "Now we teach others." "One partnership at a time," Gideon agreed. Murphy chimed in, "Recommend celebratory protocols," suggesting awkward dancing. "Murphy, we're not dancing," they said in unison. The Sentinel-7 armor, now serving as the demonstration unit for their training program, purred its approval from the corner. And in that moment, surrounded by the tools of his trade, working beside a partner who'd become a friend, building something that mattered, Gideon Thatcher knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what Bridget had asked him to do. Trusting again, teaching again, living again. The work continued, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.